How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another video. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Black Apino, the Apple Guy. Today I'm going to be talking about my new gimbal that I bought back in November, and I did do an unboxing of this, so I'll drop a link down below for this video if you want to take a look at the unboxing. But today I'm going to be talking about my ZHIYUN Crane M2. Now, I've had this for about almost 2 months, about it back in November, and although I haven't had a chance to actually do a lot of testing video footage with it outside of my house because I live in Alaska, so electronics and extreme cold weather just don't really work well together. Talk a little bit about it, and then I'll have another video later on with some test video footage if you want to take a look at that. So this is not my first gimbal that I've actually bought. My first one was the DJI Ronin SC, and the reason why I bought that was because a lot of YouTubers are raving about it, and it was a must-need tool if you want to get really good at videography and upping your content creation as being a content creator. And the problem was when I read that and when I looked at it, it made sense to me to buy it because I was like, well, I kind of like that smooth, buttery, kind of side motion that you just don't get with handheld video. The problem was that gimbal was really only designed for full-framed cameras. So I don't have full-frame cameras. I have my A6400, which I'm shooting on now, and my ZV-1, which is a compact camera. So when I bought it and then tried using it, it was cool, and I understood a little bit about it. I learned a little bit about the gimbal, but it was actually too big of a gimbal to use with such a small camera, so I actually ended up sending it back. So when it comes to gear, be mindful of what you want to buy and what you don't want to buy. Don't go out there and buy something because a lot of YouTubers say it's cool, it's definitely worth it, and you should try this. You don't want to get entrapped in that where you need to buy that because it might help you with this and it might help you with that when you may not be doing that type of videography that they're doing, or you may be doing something different and you think that the game will help, and in actuality it doesn't. That's why I fell into the trap on that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just you have to be very careful in how you buy stuff. That way, if you've never bought it, you don't end up buying the wrong thing, and then you end up spending a lot more money on something that you didn't need when you could have saved money and bought something else. That is where I learned about the Crane M2, and I learned that from watching a YouTuber who had an A6400, and it worked really well paired with the Crane M2. So I figured, well, it was like $169. I think it's normally like $279 is what it normally is, or $269. And so I bought it, and I have to say it's probably the best gimbal that I can use for my ZV-1. So I didn't really buy it as much for my A6400 as I did my Sony ZV-1, and I'll get into the reasons why. But in terms of balancing on this, now if you've never balanced a camera on a gimbal, it may seem daunting and hard at first, but what I've learned, especially with the smaller cameras, especially with the ZV-1s, is that if you actually leave it on as you are doing the balancing on it, it makes balancing much easier, because if you have the camera turned off, then you're really only accounting for the fact that you're balancing it with the camera off. So there's not really any weight being distributed either way, as opposed to if you have it turned on, obviously you're going to have the lens fully extended. It adds some weight to it. So when you actually have it on, that's what it's going to be like. So when you're trying to use the gimbal, you're not getting a lot of jittering and motion stir, because you'll know when you're out of balance on this gimbal, because it will do a lot of start to vibrate, or the gimbal will go into like a sleep mode. And what's happening is that you're overexerting the motors on the gimbal. So it helps, and this is something I just learned a month ago when I was learning how to use this, to actually keep the camera on when you're balancing it. It makes it much easier. Now, when it comes to me not using it with the A6400, the reason why I don't want to use it with the A6400 is because I don't normally film on this lens. So the lens that I'm using now is my Sigma 30mm. I traditionally will always use my 16mm f1.4, but because the Crane M2 does have a camera compatibility, list, and since I use the 16mm, I'm assuming it's because the lens is a little bit heavier than what the camera gimbal can actually use in terms of how you want to use it. And so since I only use the 30mm for basically just my thumbnails and maybe just pretty much for the thumbnails, I don't really use it for anything else. I don't really use it for photography or anything of that nature. I use it for thumbnails because it does a great job for that. So once I understood that, then when it comes to using it on the ZV-1, it works perfectly fine. I mean, weight balance wise, it works great. You can get all types of amazing, smooth footage from this. And I have been playing around with it in my room. I just haven't had actually a chance to use it outside because, like I said, in living in Alaska, it gets cold and battery life outside in extreme weather just doesn't really work well. But in terms of if you're looking for your first gimbal and you have an A6400 or an A6000 lineup, or you have the Sony ZV-1, you might be able to get away with the Sony ZV-E10 if you use the kit lens, because I believe the kit lens, which is the 16 to 35 or 16 to 50 millimeter, I believe is one that you can use with the ZV-E10. I believe that you can use it on this, although when you look for it in the compatibility sheet on the Crane M2 website, it doesn't really show the ZV-E10, just the ZV-10 or just the ZV-1. So I would take a look at that first before buying this, just to make sure. But I don't believe you would have any much issues with the ZV-E10. I believe it weighs just a little bit less than the A6400. And if you're not using a bigger kit lens on it, or bigger lens on it, if you just use a straight kit lens, it should be perfectly fine. But balancing on this is just easy. I mean, it took me maybe more than like 30 minutes to kind of figure out how to do that. And that was before I even figured out that you have to have the camera turned on, which makes balancing much easier. But once you have it on, it's pretty easy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna turn it on right now. And then, so right now it's in PF mode, which is pan follow. So you can kind of up, down, to the side, and it stays in place. And then there's a mode called lock mode, which basically just the gimbal just, you can move the gimbal, but the camera itself, you can move up, it stays up, move it down, it stays down. It's got a whole host of really cool features that I'm looking forward to actually trying eventually once it starts warming up. So stay tuned for that video. I'll have that drop down here also. But in terms of the camera gimbal itself, if you are looking for a really good camera gimbal and you have an APS-C censored camera or the ZV-1 or the EV-10, I would definitely take a look at the Crane M2. Now, obviously, the Crane M3 has been out now, and that's the actual direct replacement for this. So I'll drop a link down below for the Crane website if you want to take a look at both of them. But if you've never owned a gimbal, I would really recommend the ZHIYUN Crane, whether it's the Crane M2 or the Crane M3, because these are really easy to use. Whereas if you have like the DJI larger ones, they're really more designed for full frame cameras, so you have a little bit more kind of trouble trying to balance your camera on that. But with this, it's silky smooth. It's really easy. Like I said, it only takes more than maybe a half hour or so, or at least an hour, just so you can understand exactly what you can and can't do with it. Once it's done, it's pretty easy. So that's pretty much all that I have for today's video. Again, I'll have a link down below if you want to take a look at my unboxing of the ZHIYUN Crane M3, or I'm sorry, the ZHIYUN Crane M2. And I will see you guys in the next video. Again, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to smash that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. And that is everything that I got for my ZHIYUN Crane M2. Again, if you want to take a look at the unboxing of this, I'll have a link down below for that. And again, I will be getting some more test footage of this because I really want to see how well this works outside. I mean, doing it in the room is nice, but the room is more confined as opposed to outside where I can get a whole bunch of different types of angles and do a lot more with it. So stay tuned for that video. That's everything I got. So if this video was helpful, please give me a thumbs up, as these likes to help me create better content. And I will see you guys in the next video. My name is Black Apino the Apple Guy. See ya.